My name is Dr. Jenny Kokai, and the PAD taught me to think of myself as an artist in a global context.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the PAD podcast. My name is Rob Morgan. I teach design at Washington University in St. Louis. I should never be allowed, as I've said many times, near any audio editing software, but here I am bringing a podcast to you, the listener, one of our 4 listeners. Our guest today is Dr. Jenny Kokai. She is an award-winning educator, playwright, scholar, and administrator. She's currently at the University of South Florida. She's an accomplished playwright. As a scholar, she's recognized internationally for her work on tourism and performance, with a focus on themed and immersive entertainments. She's just a delightful interview, and I'm really excited to bring that to you. I also checked in with her since the interview, and she's got a new publication coming out. She has 2 plays for young audiences called Zombie Thoughts and Ballet for Aliens that were co-written with her son, which is really pretty cool. I will link those plays in the description for this podcast. Do check them out. And congratulations to Dr. Kokai on this latest publication of hers. Anyway, I will stop talking. She will start talking. Y'all know the drill. Enjoy this interview with Dr. Jenny Kokai. Well, my guest today is Dr. Jenny Kokai, and I'm very, very excited to talk to you, Jenny. Do you mind if I call you Jenny, first of all?
I prefer Jenny, yes.
Okay, gotcha. And you are an associate professor at the University of South Florida, and also, I believe you run the department at that university. Is that correct?
It is true. My full title, which I feel makes me sound like a show dog or a pony, is that I am the director of the School of Theater and Dance in the endowed chair of the Holloway and the Brit.
Ah, wow, that does sound fancy.
I know.
Maybe with a British accent would sound even fancier.
That's right, like a peerage.
Well, I'm very grateful to you for your time. You were a highly recommended guest, and I'm just so delighted to have a chance to talk to you about your time at WashU, your time before WashU. You got your graduate degree at WashU. I believe you're the first guest we've had, and we've had about 15 or so now, that actually did your graduate work, your master's work at WashU. And so I'd love to talk about that. But let's just start, if you don't mind, a little bit of your sort of backstory, origin story kind of thing. Like, where did you grow up, and where did you do your undergrad, and how did you find your way to the halls of Performing Arts Department at WashU?
Yeah, so I largely grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. We moved there when I was 8, but that's where I identify from. I was always in the arts. I was always that kid who was making her sisters do plays in the basement that I wrote and directed, and they reluctantly performed in. I was a child actor. I did voiceover work and appeared in commercials, nothing fancy and national, but regional banks and these kinds of things. And then I went to an insanely serious performing arts high school as an acting major. It was very serious and filled with extremely talented people who have gone on to do amazing things. And I looked around at these amazing, talented, beautiful people and realized quickly that acting was not for me. This was not where I should be. And luckily that the school also had a playwriting and directing class. That was an optional class that you could take that I started taking my sophomore year and just repeated. And I realized that I loved words and I loved creating theater, but I didn't necessarily have to be on the stage. And so by the time I went to undergrad, I went to Butler University in Indianapolis. I was a little bit of an anomaly there because just like my high school, they really focused on performers or designers, and playwrights, dramaturgs, directors were outliers for them, let alone theater historians. Like that's just not a thing that any of those programs had. And so I spent college really doing those things, working as a dramaturg on Shakespeare productions and figuring out what that was. My freshman year, they handed me the challenge of cutting King Lear to 90 minutes, which is ludicrous to ask a freshman to do in their first semester of undergrad, but I gave it my all. And at
Butler, you were pursuing a degree specifically in drama, or what would you call it?
So I was a theater studies and philosophy double major.
Oh, interesting.
So when people say, what are you going to do with that to careers? Imagine the reaction to someone majoring in theater and then philosophy as well. Luckily, my parents really didn't give me a lot of pushback on that. Occasionally they would tell me to be an English major because they thought that was more practical, which is
Sure.
wild. Or my dad like harbored a secret hope that I would get into comedy in some
Oh,
fashion.
really?
Yeah. So like they didn't push me towards anything
Nice.
STEM or business or anything like that, just
Sure.
other impractical careers. Which is
Just picture
great,
your
I guess.
dad crossing his fingers going, I hope she gets into comedy. I hope she gets
Yeah.
into comedy.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
He's still disappointed, I think, that I didn't
Oh,
become like a
that's.
writer for SNL or something.
Oh,
And so as I was finishing up my undergrad career, my senior thesis, because I was in the honors program, was to write and direct my first full-length play. So I had continued writing plays all the way through high school. Yeah. In high school, I entered the Young Playwrights Festival, which I don't think exists anymore. And like, this is a little bit of bragging. I was a finalist. I was in the top 30 out of all of the hundreds of plays. And I was really excited about that. And then I found that letter, I don't know, like a decade ago. And I realized, which I had paid absolutely no attention to when I was 18 or 19, that the selection committee who read the final plays was comprised of Stephen Sondheim and David Henry Hwang. And all of these people I had no context for or not enough context for.
Sure.
And I was like, oh my God, Stephen Sondheim read my play and thought it was good, but not good enough.
Yes.
So
wow.
So I was lucky to get a lot of really positive feedback from a really young age of my writing.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wrote a play for my senior thesis that was about ontology, essentially, like the nature of being. I don't think if you went to see the play and you didn't know that, you would know that. But it was a revisioning of Alice in Wonderland. And instead of Alice going to Wonderland, in this case, Alice was in a supermarket and met a sort of lost 20-something guy and was like, well, maybe I'm not the fictional character. Maybe all of this is fiction. How would you even know? And because he's lost and depressed, that idea really attracts him. And he sort of destroys his life trying to figure out if that's true or not.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it was about community and having something to believe in and the nature of identity and what is reality, essentially.
Wow. And you're still in college at this point. You're still an undergrad.
I am.
Wow. Amazing.
Very nerdy.
Well, not just nerdy, but super creative and sort of,
thank you.
Just aesthetically kind of a whirlwind of interesting ideas kind of in one play, it sounds like.
Yeah. Well, this was the really good thing about having gone to this like really over the top performing arts high school is that we were doing a lot of really inappropriate things.
Okay, good.
So like at one point, my junior year of high school, our teacher handed us Marat Sade and was like, figure this out, and took off for London for 3 weeks. And so this was pre-internet.
This light bit of fluff. Just read this.
Yeah. This was pre-internet. We had no context for Peter Brook or experimental theater or like, so we just gave it our best. And so, and I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, which was home of the Humana Festival.
For those who are unaware, the Humana Festival of New American Plays was a festival that took place at the Actors Theater of Louisville from 1976 all the way until 2021, and featured the works of a number of playwrights, produced works of a number of playwrights.
I grew up going to the Humana Festival and seeing all of these kinds of experimental, forward-thinking. My favorite company, if you'd asked me, graduating from high school, was the City Company and Anne Bogart's work, and I had seen 4 pieces by the time I graduated from high school, I think. Sure. So, or maybe early college as well. But I just loved what the City Company was doing. And I saw their interpretation of Miss Julie, which was stripped down and used music from Mortal Kombat and was really doing interesting things. And I spent my 17th birthday seeing parts 1 and 2 of the national tour of Angels in America.
Wow.
My best friend bought me the tickets for my birthday. So that's what I did on my 17th birthday.
Nice.
So I was really fortunate in that my conception of theater from the very get-go was much more experimental and non-realist than many people's, but it's left really weird holes in my history. So like I taught musical theater history and lit a few years back, and I've never seen Oklahoma. I've never seen it. I had to read it and watch it to teach this class because I was seeing Bob Rauschenberg America. I was not seeing Oklahoma. So, so I finished up my undergrad degree, and my plan was to go get an MFA in playwriting. And this wasn't a common thing coming out of Butler. And so people didn't really have a way to advise me. And now I know that truly you have to kind of get out there and do some more work and write some more plays. And before the playwriting MFAs will take you, you kind of have to have proven yourself in a way that someone fresh out of college hasn't done. But as part of that, I took the GRE. And so I was home for Christmas break, and former PAD chair Henry Schway called me up and was like, I see you have taken the GRE and that you are considering grad school. Can I tell you about WashU? And I was like, okay.
Nice. And did you know who Henry was prior to that point at all? Oh,
no,
that's crazy.
Not even remotely. And I wasn't even I wasn't looking at MA programs or scholarly programs at all. I was only looking at playwriting MFAs. And so he was like, you should just apply, just check us out. We'll waive the fee for you. And so I was like, okay, why not?
What do you got to lose?
Yeah, what have I got to lose? So I did apply, and then I did get in, and then I could drive up from Indianapolis, where I was in school.
Right.
And I sat in on some grad seminars and met the faculty and the other students. And I really liked that it was a research program, but it was housed in a performing arts department, and they weren't completely separate, which I now know is really a thing. But I wouldn't have liked that. I would have not attended had I not been talking to professors who worked in practical creation of art as well. And if I hadn't been told I could continue to do practical creation of art, that I could keep studying playwriting. And then WashU just had so many more resources than my small liberal arts school did. At my small liberal arts school, they were excellent. Professors were excellent at making things happen for me if I asked them to. But at WashU, there were drama and theater classes happening in departments across campus. There were students who were interested in things I was interested in from all kinds of disciplinary perspectives. And there were also just like insane opportunities. I ended up co-teaching a class on non-Western theater while I was at WashU. It was the first time I ever taught a college class, and I did not do a good job. I did a bad job. But
we all did a bad job our first time teaching.
I know. But what was wild about that is it just so happened that I'm co-teaching this class on non-Western theater, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o is at WashU for some reason. So he comes to my class. He comes and talks to our class. And Shoinka was doing the keynote speech that semester. So they were like, well, you should just, and I hung out. I just got to meet all of these luminary people. I got to, there was a Bunraku puppet company that came through. Mm-hmm. So we did a workshop with them, and they were like, this is a national treasure of Japan puppet. It's worth $1 million. Here it is. Don't drop it. So now I'm holding this puppet, this $1 million puppet.
Insane.
Yeah. And so even in my visit, I sort of realized the resources and the perspectives that WashU could offer me that I hadn't had the opportunity to take yet. And so I was like, okay, well, it's a 2-year degree. It was well funded, which I appreciated. I was 22 and unencumbered. And I was like, sure. Let me move to St. Louis and see what this is.
Nice. Yeah. So you shifted, just to clarify, you shifted gears a little bit from pursuing an MFA in playwriting, which WashU does not have.
Right.
And decided that a more broad MA in theater studies was really going to sort of serve your needs.
Yeah. And it would give me some, like I said, more global perspectives on theater, which I hadn't really had. And it, even in the grad seminars that I sat in on, it was an elevated conversation. I really got so many things out of the classes that I took at Butler, but WashU was another level in terms of the sort of scholarship that people were doing and people were expected to be doing. Yeah. And I will say I was scared. Because when I was in that grad seminar, one of the other grad students said, I'm not going to say who, a little pretentiously, well, if you haven't heard of so-and-so, why should you even be in this room? And of course, I hadn't heard of so-and-so. And I was like, oh no. Which was very,
I haven't heard of Oklahoma, the musical.
Right. Now I'm like, seriously, my guy.
Yeah.
But I liked that challenge. And if there are things out there that I don't know that I could know, I want to know them. And so I was like, okay, this will be a good step for me. And then I can figure out, do I want to pursue the MFA still? Or what do I want to do? But
Sure.
I definitely think that I will gain a lot in all areas of theater from this master's in the setting and context that this particular master's was in. So
Wonderful. Yeah.
yeah,
Love it. Yeah. So that was a 2-year program. And then you left, did you go straight from
I
graduate
did.
school to get your PhD at Texas?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I took a class on feminist theater from Julie Jordan at WashU, and I loved it. I loved the feminist theory. I loved these playwrights I've never been introduced to before. I loved, particularly, I remember reading some articles that were using feminist lenses to interrogate theater histories, and I just fell in love with them. And so when I went to do a PhD, because I was like, I am interested in this deeply nerdy stuff. I am still doing playwriting.
You're right. Right.
I wrote several plays, and then I was also directing while I was at WashU as well. So I was making
Hmm.
art, but I wanted to keep doing all of those things, keep doing all the things. And so I looked for PhD programs that had a really strong scholarly bent in feminist theater. And I ended up at UT because at the time I was there, they had a lot of the foremost scholars, 5 or 6. And I was like, well, I have to pick a dissertation advisor, and there's 5 or 6 of them, so I've got to get along with somebody.
Sure.
That was what I wanted. Like that's where I went, and that was actually
Wow.
kind of a really rude shock for me because UT was one of those programs that was very separated, and so
Uh-huh.
PhD folks were focusing solely on scholarship, and there was very, very little overlap. And I didn't write a play for the entire time I was doing my PhD, and that was very hard.
I can
Um,
imagine. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That
and so
seems
there
to
was
be
a
part
huge
of your
culture
sort of
shock.
lifeblood there is that you're,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that was, but I finished my dissertation, and the very first thing I did was write a play and then do it at the Austin Fringe.
Yeah. Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so I got back to it. I just realized that maybe you can't do everything at once to the level that you have to sometimes.
Sure, sure. Did you find Austin, and I'm a bit biased because I grew up there. Did you find that a good incubator for your work? It's kind of an eclectic little town.
Yeah.
Not little anymore, but
No, it's really changed. I was back a few years ago and it was really, really different. There's a
yeah, yeah.
lot of money and tech and Hollywood folks there.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it was also, like I said, I found a lot of culture shock going into the large state R1. That was difficult for me, and I was really used to the open door that I'd experienced at both my undergrad and at WashU and my master's. And these were not open door folks.
Yeah.
And they just had different priorities. And knowing what I know now, I'm not attributing any blame to them. It's just the priorities and where their time had to go was different as
Y-
faculty. So I did. I liked going to weird stuff at the Vortex, and all of the warehouse theater that existed then that doesn't really exist as much now because of the price of real estate.
Yeah.
And as much as I ended up working in the Newark's Festival for several years in a large capacity, serving as the student producer and the assistant to the faculty producers for that. So I still really like UT still had a really heavy new work bent, which I really did appreciate, and a sort of spirit of, even in pedagogy, even like across the board,
Yeah.
the most traditional theater scholars there, Prince scholars, still had a sort of like, let's see what happens pedagogically. Let's try this thing in a grad seminar. And that was very inspiring. They just gave an award to Stacey Wolf, the American Society of Theatrical Research did, for her work across her career. And Stacey was one of my professors, and
Mm.
her sort of bravery and willingness to do sort of anything in the classroom
Yeah.
really, really was very inspirational. So I
Wow.
appreciated that nobody was tied to tradition in
Right.
ways that I've never, as someone who never saw Oklahoma, clearly should not have been involved with.
Right. 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 You said you had to unplug a little bit from, or maybe entirely from playwriting while you were getting your PhD at Texas. Was Stephen Dietz teaching there, teaching playwriting at that time?
I
Was that a
think so.
Yeah, okay.
Um,
I mean, I know he was there for a number of years. I wasn't sure if it was while you were there, but
yeah,
I crossed
the
paths with him on
programs were
occasion.
pretty separate. I don't know
Yeah,
that I
fair.
even met Stephen. I met some
Sure.
other folks who came through, Naomi Azuka, Lisa
Of
D'Amour,
course.
really fabulous playwrights. But
Right.
for whatever reason, I never figured out the magical way to gain entry to those classes.
Fair.
So, and I did have to learn as much as I learned at WashU about rigor and argument and scholarly research, even more was expected by that faculty. And that's good. I'm grateful for it. But it was a struggle for me to put my thoughts into the orderly fashion and the scholarly voice that people expected and wanted. And actually, the field is changing a little bit to make more room for
Right.
more creative approaches now.
Sure.
But that's where my philosophy degree came in super handy, because I have
Ah.
never been worried about theory or
Hmm.
argumentation or the need to have well-supported arguments. That's things I learned from philosophical writing. But I did have to painfully teach myself to elevate my historical criticism.
Sure.
And I'm glad I did that, but it didn't allow mental space for the creative writing of playwriting, which is very separate for me. And then also, to be fair, I had a baby. I had my child right as I was finishing my 3 years of coursework and going into my dissertation. So
Got
a
it.
lot of my creative activity was put to the side because had a couple of days a week that I was doing
Of
scholarship,
course.
and the
Yes.
other days I was
Motherhood.
playing blocks, and yeah, being a mom. So
Yeah, well, that's a full-time job in itself, as we all
yeah,
know. I'm fascinated by you and sort of the sort of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary person that you are, and that, from a young age, your grounding of theater work, particularly playwriting work, was groundbreaking. Like you mentioned the Humana Festival, like there's nothing normal about the work that you see
yeah,
there. There's nothing traditional. There's nothing kind of formulaic about that work. And I'm fascinated by, I read through some of your plays that you've written and the descriptions for them, and they sound just so interesting from a designer like myself, a design point of view. It's like, oh, that sounds like a really juicy play to design. Singing to the brine shrimp, a fantasia in 12 scenes with sock puppets, ukuleles, wine, and an accident.
yes.
It's like, I love that description alone, just that one line. It's so hard, but are there favorites that you've had plays produced? Obviously, are there ones that are some of your favorites? You've been an award-winning finalist for the Bay Area Playwrights Festival. Can you talk maybe about one or two of them?
Yeah. So success. Okay, let me think. I would say, okay.
Choose your favorite child of your
Yeah, yeah,
plays.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say that I love collaborating, and that is why I'm in the theater. Like
Ah,
I have always been in the theater is the thing. So it is eclectic, but also like I will be honest, I'll turn 46 in 5 days, 6 days.
okay. Oh, happy
Five
birthday.
days. Thank you. So I'll turn 46. But as I said, I started off as a child actor. And so my very first, there is a picture of me from a shoe ad in a backpack as a baby with a pinwheel taped to my hand because I couldn't hold yet.
I love it.
So I have had essentially a 46-year career at this
Yes.
point.
Yes.
And so it has allowed me to focus sometimes on this element or focus sometimes on that element. But at the end of the day, I love, 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 love being in a room collaborating with people.
Hmm.
I love collaborating with designers. I love collaborating with dramaturgs, with
Hmm.
directors. As a director, I have done a lot of my scholarship has been co-authored and for real co-authored, which is again more common, starting to become more common. It
Hmm.
hadn't been common in the humanities, but it is wonderful when you can successfully collaborate with people. And so I do tend to write things either for specific actors in my mind or
Hmm.
with the idea of who I'm going to collaborate with. And so like there have been things that I've been working on where I write something and then I text my friend who I know will be scenic designing if it's a commissioned piece or if it's a
Sure.
piece for a school. And I'm like, so I just kind of wrote this magical lamppost that turns into a stove. Don't hate me. Just kind of think about how that's going to happen.
Right.
And the most wonderful thing for me in the whole world is when there are a group of people committed to the same project,
Sure.
problem solving and building that world together, just like playing pretend as an adult. And
Mm.
so I try to write pieces that are about that collaboration, that leave scope for that collaboration. In one of
Nice.
my plays, Girl of Glass, I was like, okay, well, there are directors who really want to strongly bring a vision to things.
Mm-hmm.
And auteur directors can be kind of, if they're reinterpreting Shakespeare, sure, whatever. Shakespeare doesn't care, he's dead. But if you get someone who really wants to have a voice on a new piece, that can be hard because it's like,
Yeah.
well, where's my voice as a playwright? I want space for your voice. So in Girl of Glass, there are sequences that are memories, and they are just descriptions, and they are fully left for that production, that director, those actors to create together.
Got it.
And so I
Yeah.
was like, so here is space within my world for you to fully have your voice. And if that's what is your jam in theater, please like bring your full voice to these moments and then let that inflect the other things that are more my voice. Or like Singing to the Brine Shrimp ended up being a collaboration with a company called Puppets in the City that specializes in making puppets, and Shelby's amazing. And so I was like, okay, well, I know that I can put sock puppets into this play, and I will be working with this artist who can do these amazing sock puppets. And then I wrote songs. I wrote 4 songs for that because I wanted an opportunity to collaborate with Ken, my friend Ken Plain, who ended up being the composer as well for the full musical that we did. And so I was like, how can I play with more people? How can I fold these people into the world as well? That has a scenic challenge because in that, the idea of that play is that the character Allison wheels out a huge teal suitcase, and out of that teal suitcase, everything comes. And I was like, well, there are going to be different ways to do that. I can think of a very low tech way to do that.
Sure.
And in this case, they ended up building a structure on stage that allowed for levels, but then the suitcase also had a trapdoor. So you could literally come through the suitcase and things could come through the suitcase from under the platform. Every time I write something, I am definitely like, how can this be the most collaborative, most fun thing? And I am always so grateful. The greatest feeling in the world is to have all of these brilliant, creative people who are willing to put in the time and energy to make this thing in my head a real thing. That is the most amazing thing in the world. Yeah. And then at Wash U, I was really fortunate. I no longer remember if we were discussing this before we started the recording or after, but I was really fortunate to take a class on Japanese theater, traditional Japanese theater, to take a class on Arabic literature and translation that had a lot of Arabic theater in it, to take a class on Yoruban theater when I was doing my PhD. So I took all of these classes on non-Western forms that had been huge influences on that experimental theater I had seen growing up, that had been huge influences on the City Company or the more the Peter Brook type of experimentation. And so then I was like, oh, these cultures take puppetry seriously. It's for adults. Or this is not, these folks don't care about realism because their culture sees the intersection of the world of the gods and our world differently, or they experience time differently, or they use space differently. And so I felt a lot of freedom in that to just continue adding all of the elements that are so theatrical, that allow space for lots of people to be really creative. And at the end of the day, like I've always been interested in what makes theater a unique and best art form, and how that's different from film. And so I've never really been interested in replicating what film does better, which is realism.
Sure, sure. Wow, this is fascinating. This is maybe an unfair analogy, but I see you as kind of like a water wheel, where one side of you, the playwright side of you, feeds into your studies, which then feeds into the teaching that you do, and all that kind of. It's just you're a wonderful multidisciplinary artist that is energized by the other fields that you're working in. I don't know if that's accurate, if you would say.
No, I think that's true. And I also like the water wheel thing, just because I ended up writing my first book about water and aquatic spectacles.
Hey, I didn't even know I backed into a segue.
You did. You segued.
Would you talk about that? It's called Swim Pretty, Aquatic Spectacles and the Performance of Race, Gender, and Nature.
Yeah. So I wrote, this is gonna sound funny again. I wrote my PhD dissertation actually on women and their use of performance as a mode of social political engagement during the American Revolution. Mm-hmm. And I focused on Boston. And so when I graduated, I was using databases for those resources that were incredibly expensive databases. Like I think a subscription to them costs the university library something like, at the time it costed like $150,000 a year.
Whoa.
So I don't think people realize how expensive some of these library resources are.
Oh, for sure. Mm-hmm.
So I graduated and I lost access to them.
Mm.
And I was living in Austin, Texas, and my research was about New England. So I couldn't just head over to the, you know, American Antiquarianism Society, which I had visited briefly, but to do research during my PhD.
Yeah.
And so like I said, I wrote a play about fiberglass whale that's actually still in a lake of an office building. It's a leftover from an amusement park called Pleasure Island. And it's
Wow.
in Massachusetts. And when they closed the park down, they just left Moby Dick in the lake. So that whale carcass is still there, which just creeped me out for some reason.
I can imagine, yes.
Yes. And then I guess because I had just been thinking about amusement parks and lakes, maybe, I went to visit my grandmother, who lived my whole life right outside of Weeki Wachee, which is the city of live mermaids, and where they have done the Weeki Wachee mermaid show since the 40s. And I had grown up going to it. And so we took my child. I'm watching them do The Little Mermaid, which they've done since the Disney movie came out. And I'm looking at it, and it's an underwater theater. You go down the steps and you see below the natural spring.
Oh,
They
wow.
put plate glass windows, and
Sure.
you watch women with air tubes performing this piece. And I was like, this is weird. It was weird. The whole story was weird. They were like, it's the Little Mermaid's, you know, like 15th birthday. Then, of course, she ends up married. And you're like, wait, what? Wait, what? Because I'm there with my child. And I'm like, wait a second. And then there's this really weird moment where the sea witch crosses the fourth wall, even though it's underwater, and pops out of this little porthole into the theater space. But it doesn't like gush water at us. And I'm like, well, how is that happening? And the park was kind of empty. And I was like, this is a really weird show. Like, I've never thought about this my whole life. I've always just gone to this. And so because I kind of was in a limbo space, I ended up doing some critical, like some scholarly research into Weeki Wachee and the mermaid shows, and how they developed and what they were doing now, and sort of what the conversation was about gender and ecology. And it was almost immediately published. Like I submitted it, it was almost immediately published, which as a very young academic is not a super common thing to happen.
No, not at all.
And so I was like, oh, people are interested in this. And then I got a job as an adjunct at Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas.
Yep.
And they had acquired a theme park. Texas State owned Aquarina Springs.
I remember that growing up.
Adjacent to it. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And they had a submarine theater where they did a mermaid show.
Oh, I'll be darned.
And I was like, this is weird. So I wandered over to the recently opened university archives and was like, what have you got on your mermaid show?
Yeah.
And Chris Toma, the archivist at the time, was like, oh, we literally were just given these scrapbooks, and the scrapbooks were they were in a terrible state. They were like water damaged and things had fallen off. And she was like, go for it. And so then I had a second mermaid show that was explicitly based on Weeki Wachee.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, what? So where did these come from and where did they go?
Right.
And that's how I ended up with the book. And it takes up lots of things that are kind of hallmark Jenny things, which is gender, nature, and climate change, non-human animal performers, ridiculousness, sort of popular performance traditions in sort of theme parky kinds of spaces. Those are all very Jenny topics. And so because I couldn't do anything about the American Revolution, I sort of ended up becoming an expert on mermaids.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. We're a little bit running out of time, but I'd love this. There seems to be a really interesting sort of natural segue yet again to your next book, Disney Parks and the Construction of American Identity, Tourism, Performance, Anxiety.
That's my third book, actually.
Third book. I've got your books out of order.
Yeah, so
there's a second book in there.
There is a second book. So my second book was Performance in the Disney Theme Park Experience, The Actor as Tourist. Is an anthology that I edited that I'm working on the second edition of. If you're not in publishing, you might not know that publishers change your book titles to optimize search term.
Yes.
So your book title might become a collection of search terms that you don't know. And so I frequently don't know the name of my books because they're not what I call them in my head. They're what the publishers wanted.
Yeah. My book, they told me I couldn't, it's over my shoulder. I couldn't call it what I wanted to call it. They said,
really? Yeah. No,
that's cute, but you can't call it that.
That's right. That's I fought tooth and nail to keep Swim Pretty.
Yeah.
Fought tooth and nail, and then we totally lost on the next two books.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
The next two books, your second and third book, are related to Disney parks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Can you talk briefly about how those sort of are an outgrowth of the work that you do as both a playwright and a scholar? That it seems that, to me at least, the layman's sort of point of view is that there's an interesting mirror that you're holding up, that theme parks are a microcosm or perhaps idealized American ideal in a park. And it tells us a lot about ourselves. Am I at all following the right
Yeah,
path?
I think
Okay.
that, yes, I think that's correct. I think that one of the things, if you have read anything about Disney, at the first scholarly books on Disney were all about how Disney was destroying culture,
Uh-huh.
and that it was turning people, and this was a long European philosophical tradition, actually, but it was turning people, especially like credulous, naive, stupid Americans, into passive consumers who just willingly accepted every ideologically stupid thing Disney put in front of them.
Yeah.
So there's like the Disneyization, Disneyfication. It's all very, very negative.
Oh.
And I think, yes, definitely, because I'm a playwright and
Hmm.
a professor, and I have both seen audiences and taught students who were not the slightest bit interested in my perspective
Yeah.
or in the story that I wanted to tell, and were fully bringing their own thing to the room and could waylay things in fascinating directions, sometimes productive, sometimes not productive. I was like, this is absolutely wrong. There's no
Mm.
such thing as a passive consumer.
Hmm.
And so both of these books, the first is an anthology, so it has a bunch of different authors. And
Nice.
the second is a monograph that I co-wrote with Dr. Tom Robson. They both come from this framework of the tourist as actor, where
Mm.
we look at the tourist as a participant in the construction of a performance that, yes, takes place on the Disney stage and is shaped by Disney choices, but the tourist is always accepting, rejecting, or negotiating the roles that Disney gives them.
Mm.
And the ways that those roles evolve over time definitely shows us a lot about American culture and how
Hmm.
American culture has changing notions of who is, like, what is a family, what is a mom, what is a dad, what is an athlete, what is an American, what does it mean to be a good citizen, what
Hmm.
does good behavior look like. There's a million ways that aren't explicitly like about patriotism or history necessarily. There are really good books on that, but that's not usually what we're interested in. We're really interested in the implicit ideas of Americanism that until they're broken or disrupted, we all just sort of accept as the status quo. But if you look at how different rides, attractions, or shows have changed, or how the Disney guests, as Disney calls them, have changed, you can really see how American culture is evolving and changing and where the pressure points are. And so the first book, like I said, was an anthology. And so we have lots of different authors taking up lots of different interesting directions on that. One of my favorite essays was about Disneyland, which I didn't know because I went to Disney World growing up. Disneyland had these things called social clubs that are essentially gangs, and they have different turf in Disneyland.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And some of them got in legal trouble for mafia-like protection schemes that they were running around Disney-based events. Yeah. So that
Mm.
was fascinating to me.
Mm.
Or people who really heavily identify with villains and villain
Sure.
subcultures. So that's what
Sure.
that anthology is, a lot of different perspectives. And my particular chapter in that was about Nemo and the Living Seas Pavilion in Epcot and how it evolved from being the idea of an underwater research base you were visiting to a Nemo-based attraction, and the
Mm.
move from the guest as being cast as a research scientist to just having an affective relationship with Nemo. Like, you like Nemo, so like the ocean. And that parallels growing nature deficits that have been studied and our disconnection from the natural world and the waning of biodiversity. And so it's not a critique of Disney and it's not a critique of people. It's just that if we look at how this attraction has evolved, we can also see how our society has evolved.
Absolutely. Mm.
Yeah. And the monograph is kind of an extension of that, where Tom and I take up more in-depth analyses of environment and athleticism and families. And we did have to end up talking about politics, like out explicit politics, just because Disney has gotten into, was in a major fight with the governor of Florida for a long
Yeah.
time. And political partisanship is at its highest recorded ever in history of recording of
Yes.
that. So there's
Hmm.
really no way to avoid that, even in the Disney parks.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. For some time, that's one of my non-theatrical forays in my lifetime was designing a SeaWorld show, Sea Lion and Otter show at SeaWorld San Diego. That experience opened my eyes to just what we're doing or what we were doing together with this Sea Lion and Otter show, which was arguably like the comic relief
Was it Clyde?
of the park. And it was how highly curated it is and
Mm-hmm.
how it was the anthropomorphic behaviors of the sea lions that audiences loved, and yet that taught us really nothing about the sea lion as an animal. And it
Um,
was, yeah.
there might be a scholarly critique of your show in my book.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I talk about the Sea Lion and Otter show extensively
In the
in
San
book
Diego
three.
park?
Well, I do all of the SeaWorld parks in
Oh,
the chapter
gotcha.
on
Yes, yeah.
SeaWorld.
Yeah.
So I'm is it Clyde? The Clyde the
Clyde and Seymour, yes.
uh-huh. So I write about that show extensively.
Oh my gosh. Wow, this is an interesting connection I did not expect. Wow. Yeah,
Yes,
so I
sorry,
just
my
if it looked like
microphone
a
keeps.
giant submarine, that's the one I designed. It was there was a character named Cazador who was searching for a mermaid
Oh, no, I
and
didn't do that one. I did no, not that one. Not that particular Clyde one. A
oh,
different
okay.
iteration of Clyde I cover. But I make many of those same
Yes.
points
Yes.
about the curation and anthropomorphic. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I had so many just dumb, stupid designer questions for the trainer when I was doing that show. Like, I'm thinking about stairs. Can a sea lion climb stairs? Like, what can I get away with? And
Yeah.
so,
Well, I don't know how much you know about the history of SeaWorld because you've worked there, so stop me. But
sure.
SeaWorld was started by three fraternity brothers who had no knowledge of marine biology. And if you read the biography of one of them, he had ideas for shows like he was going to do a whale penguin show where the penguins were going to do like soft shoe tap dance on the whale.
Yeah,
And he was
exactly.
big mad that that couldn't happen.
Yes. Yeah, it's somewhat sad, I'll admit. But yeah, that was my graduate schooling
Wild.
in San Diego led to a connection. I did one project for SeaWorld, and then
Huh?
that involved no animals. It was in Mission Bay, and then later did the Sea Lion and Otter show in 2005 or six, I think it was. But
Okay.
yes,
Well,
I still show pictures in class, and some students are like, "I saw that when I was 4." I'm like, "I didn't ask you how old you were."
yeah, yeah. Please don't tell
Um,
me.
well, Dr. Kokai, it's just been a treat to chat with you, and I am very very grateful, as are my colleagues at WashU, for spending some time reminiscing about your time, before and after WashU, and the success that you've become is just an inspiration.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I'm very very delighted and grateful to you for your time. So thank you. Is there anything else that you any kind of wisdom you might want to impart to, let's say, in your case, first year grad student at WashU that might just be starting out and unsure? I think at one point you said that you were scared. I think we all often are scared of that
Yeah.
experience.
I will say I mean, so putting on my administrative hat, right? Because
Yeah,
I oversee a theater and dance program. And so I deal with students and parents who are scared
of
about the
course. Yeah.
arts. And there's a lot of scary narratives, even though research shows that graduates from the performing arts are less underemployed than business or IT graduates.
Yes. Yes.
So
Thank you for saying that.
you're welcome. So I learned so many skills. So like one of the things that I would say is that what I have learned over the duration of my career is, like I said, you don't have to give things up, that sometimes you might focus on one part of yourself as an artist or a scholar or one avenue in the arts, but that there's no time limit. I didn't have to quit being a playwright forever just because I put that aside for 5 or 6 years.
Right.
And I think there's this notion that if you're not always progressing your career, like if you're like, you can't come back to acting someday if you want to, like you
Mm-hmm.
can't come back to doing this if you want to. And I don't think that's true. I think that when I've taken time away, I've kept up on what was happening, but the other kinds of things that I was doing and the other muscles I was exercising, as you pointed out, positively influenced that different bit when I came back to it. And then I would say that like I learned so many skills about collaboration and time management and budgeting and a tech teaches you executive function. A tech
Yeah.
is long and a tech is boring. And you have to focus even when you don't want to.
Yes.
And I do paperwork now on assessment and accreditation that many of my colleagues don't want to do, but I can do because I have sat through a cajillion techs. And I know that I have to sit down and do this paperwork for the rest of the things that I love to continue to happen, for the magic to happen. I think it is really foolish to map careers to what you study.
Yeah.
And I think that if you study something in college that you love, that you can gain so many skills that can go in so many different directions if you're open to seeing sort of weird possibilities in life and keep your eye out for fantastical, magical things. So there are all these skills that I was gathering all along the way that now I've parlayed into an administrative position, which is a really secure position. It is, I am sort of meeting all of those things that normal parents hope for their kids about financial stability and health insurance and being able to send my kid to college. And all of those are skills from theater. All of those were skills I got from doing theater my whole life. And people don't have those skills. I have had comp sci kids in my classes because they want those skills and they don't have them. And that's what separates. My spouse is a software architect. He asked me for help with a lot of those soft skills they call them. He didn't have those, but now he's in a senior leading position. And that's what differentiates him, is that communication, collaboration, dealing with people in heightened circumstances, explaining ideas in a multitude of ways that we do in theater.
Sure.
So
and empathy and all of that stuff.
Empathy, all of that.
Absolutely.
So I, at 46, having done this my whole life, am really passionate that the performing arts have the skills that if you want to double major in something, go for it. If you end up being a doctor, great. If you end up being a mechanical engineer, I know some of them, great. But there is nothing useless about a theater degree, just nothing. And it's so frustrating to me that we can't shift the narrative on that people are scared of that, because it is the most, I can do a ground plan and then remodel my bathroom. It is the most valuable degree ever. So that is what I would say to incoming people.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and thank you so much. I feel like more people need to hear that. More prospective students, more parents need to hear that there's a lot to be learned from what we teach.
Yeah.
And not just learned, but parlayed, as you said, into a really wonderful career. And in your case, multidisciplinary career, which I really appreciate and respect. Again, Dr. Jenny Kokai, thank you so much for joining the PAD podcast. My many thanks to Dr. Jenny Kokai for joining the PAD podcast. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please reach out to me, Rob Morgan, at Washington University in St. Louis. I would be happy to interview you for the podcast.